Hey, shalom, shalom to all my fellow brothers and sisters out there. It's me again, Damian Power from YeshuaSavesAll.com. Peace be to you in the name of our Father, Yahweh, and our Master, the Son of Yahweh, Yeshua HaMashiach. So today, my fellow brothers and sisters, we're going to be talking about Yeshua and the 12 disciples symbolism. Okay, we all know that Yeshua had 12 Talmudim disciples that he chose out of the world, but what does the 12 represent, and what does Yeshua being with the 12 disciples represent? So we know that in Matthew chapter 10 verse 1 through 4, and having called his 12 Talmudim disciples near, he gave them authority over unclean spirits to cast them out and to heal every disease and every bodily weakness. And these are the names of the 12 emissaries: Simon, who was called Kepha, Andre and his brother, James the son of Zabdi and John his brother, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew the tax collector, James of Haleb, of Labdi, whose last name was Thaddeus, Simon the Canaanite, and Judas Iscariot, who delivered him up. Okay, so firstly, we'll start off. What does the number 12 represent? The number 12 often represented the 12 tribes of Israel. And we can see it, for example, in Exodus chapter 28, verse 9 through 11. The the instructions for the garments that the high priest would wear, which would be Aaron, right? And you shall make two shoham stones and engrave on them you should grave on them the names of the sons of Israel, the 12 tribes, six of their names on one stone, and the remaining six names on the other stone, according to their birth. So a part of the what Aaron would have to wear would be two shoham stones on each shoulder, which would be remembrance before Yahweh of the sons of Israel, and they would have six names on one stone, six names on the other stone, according to their birth, which we'll get to in a second. Yeah, according to their birth, with the work of an engraver in stone, like engravings of a signet, engrave the two stones with the names of the sons of Israel. Put them in mountings of gold, and you shall put the two stones on the shoulder pieces of the shoulder garment as stones of remembrance for the sons of Israel. And Aharon shall bear the names before Yahweh on his two shoulders for a remembrance. And you shall make mountings of gold, two chains of clean gold like braided cords, and fasten the braided chains to the mounting. And you shall make a breastplate of right ruling, a work of skilled workmen, like the work of the shoulder garment. Make it of gold, of blue and purple and scarlet, and fine woven linen. It is square, double, zereth its length, and zereth its width. And you shall put mountings of stones in it, 4 rows of stones. The 4 rows of stones. The first row is a ruby, of topaz, and emerald. The second row is turquoise, sapphire, and a diamond. And the third row is jacinth, agate, amethyst. And the fourth row is a beryl, and a shoham, and a jasper. They are put in gold mountings, and the stones are according to the names of the sons of Israel. 12 according to their names, like the engravings of a signet, each one with his own name for the 12 tribes. Now, I want to look at Leviticus chapter 24, verse 5 through 9. Leviticus chapter 24, verse 5 through 9. And you shall take fine flour and bake 12 cakes with it, 2/10 parts of each cake, and you shall put them in 2 rows, 6 in a row, on the clean table before Yahweh. So this reminds me of what we just read of the two shoham stones with the names of the sons of Israel. The Aaron wore as high priest, or Kohen Hagadol, divided by putting 6 names, by putting one shoulder, one stone on each shoulder with the 6 names. And we see right here the showbread that's on the golden table is divided, is 12 loaves of showbread, but they're divided in 2 rows of 6. I saw a parallel there. But anyway, let's go on, move on to Revelation chapter 21, verse 12 through 14. Revelation chapter 21, verse 12 through 14. And having a great and high wall, having 12 gates, and at the gates 12 messengers, or malachim, or angels, and names written on them, which are the 12 tribes of the children of Israel. 3 gates on the east, 3 gates on the north, 3 gates on the south, and 3 gates on the west. And the wall of the city had 12 foundations, and on them were the names of the 12 emissaries of the Lamb. So, here we have the names of the 12 tribes of Israel, and we have the 12 Talmudim, the disciples mentioned as part of the New Jerusalem, which ties in to the point of the message. So, Yeshua being present with the 12 disciples, the Talmudim, is a representation of the restored kingdom of Israel, where the 10 northern tribes, the 10 tribes of the northern kingdom, which is Ephraim, Israel, and the 2 tribes of the southern kingdom, which is Judah, Yehuda, and Benjamin, will be joined back together as one house with one king ruling over them, and that king is Yeshua. To understand this concept, we have to go and look at what happened to cause this division in the first place, and the future promise of the regathering of the 2 houses together as one. So we're going to look at 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 1 through 13, and then verse 29 through 35. So we're going to start there. And King Solomon loved many foreign women, in addition to the daughter of Pharaoh, the Moabite, Ammonite, Edomite, Zidonian, and Hittite women, from the nations of whom Yahweh had said to the children of Israel, you do not go into them, and they do not go into you. For they shall certainly turn away your hearts after other mighty ones. Solomon clung to these in love, and he had 700 wives, princesses, 300 concubines, and his wives turned away his heart. And it came to be, when Solomon was old, that his wives turned away his heart after other mighty ones. And his heart was not perfect with Yahweh his Elohim, as was the heart of his dad David. And Solomon went after Ashtoreth, which is a pagan deity, the mighty one of the Sidonians, and Milkom, the abomination of the Ammonites. Thus Solomon did evil in the eyes of Yahweh, and did not follow Yahweh completely like his dad David. Then Solomon built a high place for Chemosh, the abomination of Moab, on the hill that is east of Jerusalem, the Mount of Olives, and for Molech, the abomination of the children of Ammon. And so he did for all his foreign wives, who burned incense and slaughtered to their mighty ones. Therefore Yahweh was enraged with Solomon, because his heart had turned away from Yahweh Elohim of Israel, who had appeared to him twice, and had commanded him concerning this word, not to go after other mighty ones. But he did not guard what Yahweh had commanded. And Yahweh said to Solomon, because you have done this, and have not guarded my covenant and my laws which I commanded you, I shall certainly tear the reign away from you, and to give it to your servant. Only I do not do it in your days, for the sake of your dad David. Out of the hand of your son I shall tear it. Rehoboam. Only I shall not tear it. Only I shall not tear it away. Only I shall not tear away all the rain, but give one tribe, which is Judah and Benjamin, to your son for the sake of my servant David and for the sake of Jerusalem, which I have chosen. Now let's go to verse 29 and verse 35 through 35. And it came to be at that time when Jeroboam went out of Jerusalem that the prophet Ahiah the Shilonite met him on the way. And he was wearing a new garment, and the two were alone in the field. And Ahiah took a hold of the new garment that was on him and tore it into 12 pieces. So you know that's a representation of the 12 tribes. He tore it into 12 pieces and said to Jeroboam, take for yourself 10 pieces. Now we know what that 10 pieces is. That's the 10 tribes that he would get, because Yahweh's tearing the kingdom away from Solomon's son Rehoboam. Take for yourself 10 pieces, for thus saith Yahweh, the Elohim of Israel, see, I am tearing the rain out of the hand of Solomon, and shall give 10 tribes. That's why he gave him the 10 pieces of the roll, because he would get the 10 tribes. Ephraim, Israel, to you. But he, which is Solomon's son Rehoboam, shall have one tribe, which we talked about, which is Judah and Benjamin, for the sake of my servant David, and for the sake of Jerusalem, the city which I have chosen out of all of the tribes of Israel. So we can see that when Solomon fell into idolatry in 1 Kings 11, the kingdom was split into two kingdoms. Okay, so you had the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. Solomon's son Rehoboam received the 2 tribes, the southern kingdom, and Jeroboam received the other 10 tribes, the northern kingdom. Ever since then, there was always 2 separate houses with 2 separate kings ruling over them. Okay, so that's what happened. So that's why I want to make the parallel with the symbolism here a little later on in the message. But that's what happened. It was 2 separate houses. So you had the northern kingdom, they had their own king. The southern kingdom, they had their own king. It was a split. Then throughout the times, both houses committed spiritual adultery against Yahweh by worshiping false mighty ones. Although it seems that Judah remained more faithful than Israel, however, they would eventually go into exile themselves. So Judah wasn't perfect in the walk, but they seemed to remain more faithful than Israel did. So we can look at Hosea chapter 11, verse 12, for example. It says, Ephraim has surrounded me with lying, and the house of Israel with deceit. But Judah is still wandering with Ale, and is true to the Holy One. You see, so Judah was still clinging, and then to Yahweh and his ways. 2 Chronicles chapter 18, verse 3 through 7 gives us more insight to this. It says, and Ahab, the king of Israel, said to Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, do you go with me against Ramoth Gilead? And he answered him, I am as you are, and my people as your people, even with you in battle. And Jehoshaphat said to the king of Israel, please inquire for the word of Yahweh today. And the king of Israel gathered prophets together, 400 men, and said to them, do we go against Ramoth Gilead to battle, or do I refrain? And they said, go up, for Elohim gives it into the king's hand. But Jehoshaphat said, is there not still a prophet of Yahweh here, so that we can inquire of him? And the king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, there is still one man to inquire of Yahweh from him, but I hate him, because he never prophesies good concerning me, but always evil. He is Micaiah, the son of Yimlah. And Jehoshaphat said, let not the king say so. As you can see, there was one man there, right, who was a Navi, a prophet of Yahweh, Micaiah. This shows that Israel had turned away from Yahweh, as Ahab called pagan prophets to inquire, which is why Jehoshaphat said, is there not a prophet of Yahweh that we can inquire? You see? So this shows that the house of Judah was still following Yahweh, at least to this point. They were always more faithful. And I'm just thinking about it now, Ezekiel, for example, in Ezekiel 4, when Ezekiel had to lay on his side for I think it was 190 days. I can't remember how many days it was exactly for the sins of Israel. 1 day for a year and 40 days on the other side for the house of Judah. So you can see Judah sin less, though they weren't perfect. But that's just the point that I'm trying to make. So now we see that the house of Israel stumbled greatly because most of their kings walked in the ways of Jeroboam, son of Nebat. Okay, most of the house of Israel, most of the kings walked in the ways of Jeroboam. So what did Jeroboam do? Let's look at 1 Kings chapter 12, verse 26, and you'll see a greater understanding here. Jeroboam said in his heart, "Now when the rain shall return to the house of David, if these people go up to do slaughterings in the house of Yahweh at Jerusalem, then the heart of these people shall turn back to their master Rehoboam, king of Judah, and they shall slay me and go back to Rehoboam, king of Judah." So the king took counsel and made 2 calves of gold. What does that remind you of? Exodus 32, right? When Aaron made the 2 golden calves with the people. So the king took the counsel and made 2 calves of gold and said to the people, "It is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. See your mighty ones, O Israel, which brought you up from the land of Mitzrayim, Egypt." And he put up one in Bethel, and the other he put up in Dan, or Dan. And this matter became a sin, for the people went before the one as from Dan, and he made the house of high places. He made priests from all sorts of people who were not the sons of Levi. And Jeroboam performed a festival on the 15th day of the 8th month, like the festival that was in Judah. In other words, he was mocking Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacle, which is on the 15th day of the 7th month. He made a feast on the 15th day of the 8th month. And he offered up on the altar. And so he did at Bethel, slaughtering to the calves that he had made. And he made offerings on the altar, which he had made at Bethel on the 15th day of the 8th month, in the month which he had devised in his own heart. And he performed a festival for the children of Israel and offered on the altar and burned incense. Okay, so as we can see, Jeroboam committed a great sin against Yahweh, even after Yahweh gave him 10 tribes and told him that he would build him a steadfast house as long as he walked in the ways of his ancestor David. But instead, he trusted in his own strength and did it his own way. So whenever you see in scripture where a king walked in the ways of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, that is what they were doing. They were walking in his ways and not in Yahweh's ways. They were making golden calves to worship. They were making priests out of any tribe that was. They were making priests out of any tribe that was not from the tribe of Levi. Now we know that our Father Yahweh ordained the Levites for the priesthood and no other tribe. So you can see that's a great sin that Jeroboam did. You see, and he made his own festival day that he devised in his own heart, similarly to how Christianity has made false days to worship. And because of these abominations that the king of Israel committed, Yahweh exiled them to Assyria. So that's where the exile in Assyria came from in 2 Kings chapter 17, verse 16 through 18. And they left all the commands of Yahweh their Elohim and made for themselves a molded image, 2 calves, and made Asherah and bowed themselves to all the hosts of the Shamayim, the heavens, and served Baal, and caused their sons and daughters to pass through the fire, and practiced divination and sorcery, and sold themselves to do evil in the eyes of Yahweh to provoke him. So Yahweh was enraged with Israel and removed them from his presence. None was left but the tribe of Judah alone. So we know that the tribe of Judah is, house of Judah is Judah and Benjamin. That's 2 tribes. That was the one that was left. The other 10 tribes, the house of Ephraim, Israel, was taken to Assyrian exile. Okay, so this is where the term comes from, the lost tribes of Israel. Comes from here because they were taken to Assyrian exile. And they eventually became mixed in with the Gentiles and forgetting that they were even Israelites because they became mixed in with the nations. They forgot who they were. So Hosea chapter 7 verse 8 says, Hosea 7:8, Ephraim is mixed among his people. Ephraim became a cake unturned. And then when you go to Hosea 8:8, Hosea 8:8 says, Israel is swallowed up. Now it has become among the nations as a worthless vessel, for they have gone up to Assyria. Ephraim has flourished again against himself. They love gifts. Therefore they shall be delivered to the nations. Now I will receive them, and they shall a little to anoint a king and princes. So then about 130 years later, about approximately, Judah was taken into Babylonian exile. So you have the Assyrian exile, which I said they date to about 722 BC, of the house of Israel, the 10 tribes taken by Shalmaneser, the king of Assyria. And then about 130 years later, which is about what they say about 597 BC, that the numbers are kind of, nobody can really agree with the numbers, but that's why I'm saying about approximately about 130 years later, Judah was taken into Babylonian exile by Nebuchadnezzar, and the temple was destroyed. So we can see that Lamentations chapter 1 verse 3 in the Septuagint says, and it came to pass after Israel was taken captive and Jerusalem made desolate, that Jeremiah, sat weeping and lamented with this lamentation over Jerusalem, and said, how the city that was filled with people sits solitary. She has become a widow. She that was magnified among the nations and princess among provinces has become tributary. She weeps great in the night, and her tears are on her cheeks. And there are none of all her lovers to comfort her. All that were her friends have dealt deceitfully with her. They have come her enemies. Judah has gone into captivity by reasons of her affliction and by reason of abundance of her servitude. She dwells among the Gentiles. She has not found rest. All her pursuers have overtaken her between her oppressors. So we know that Jeremiah, he warned them that they would go into Babylonian exile. They did not turn from their ways. Stop breaking the terms of the covenant of the Torah. Stop dealing, stop mistreating the widows and the orphans and the poor of the land. They didn't do it. They went to Babylonian exile. Okay, so then we see in Ezra 1 that the Jews, Benjamin, Judah, the Jews, which was the house what we talked about, the southern kingdom, Jews and Benjamin, the southern kingdom survived because they were allowed to return to the homeland after the 70 years of Babylonian exile, while the other tribes remained lost. Although they say that some of the tribes have been found, such as Beta Israel, which is a tribe of the Ethiopians. They say that some of those lost tribes are being found again. But for the most part, they are still lost, scattered amongst the nations. That is why Yeshua, when he said that he came for the lost sheep of the house of Israel, because the southern kingdom that included Judah and Benjamin, where the Jews come from, were not lost, unlike the other tribes. So let's look at Ezra chapter 1, verse 1 through 4. And in the first year of Cyrus, the king of Persia, that the word of Yahweh by the mouth of Jeremiah might be accomplished. Yahweh stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, to proclaim throughout all his reign, and also in his writing, saying, thus says Cyrus, king of Persia, Yahweh Elohim of the Shamaim, the heavens, has given me all the reigns of the earth. And he has commanded me to build him a house in Jerusalem, which is in Judah, who is among you of all his people. His Elohim be with him. Let him go up to Jerusalem, which is in Judah, and build the house of Yahweh Elohim of Israel. He is Elohim, which is in Jerusalem. Whoever is left from all the places where he sojourns, let the men of his place help him with silver and gold, with goods and livestock, besides the voluntary offerings for the house of Elohim, which is in Jerusalem. And the heads of the fathers of Judah and Benjamin, that southern kingdom, which who returned from Babylonian exile, and the priests and Levites, with all those whose spirits Elohim had stirred, rose up to go and build the house of Yahweh, which is in Jerusalem. So this is when the second temple was starting to be rebuilt after it had been knocked down by the Babylonians during the exile. Okay, and there were Judah and Benjamin and the Levites were there to partake in this. Now, we know that the second temple was destroyed in 70 AD, and the Jews have been scattered all over the world as well. Okay, although they were still able to maintain their identity. Remember we talked about how Israel became swallowed up by the nations. They got swallowed up by the Gentiles, and they lost their identity. And that's a whole nother topic to cover. But there's a lot of people who have Israelite blood from the tribe of Ephraim, and they don't even know it. They don't even know it because they, like I said, became scattered amongst the nations. So when people start to hear the word of Yahweh being spoken, and it's like, man, that resonates with me. That's because, you possibly could have Ephraim, Israelite blood within you when they became scattered amongst the nations. It's beautiful, but that's a whole nother topic. Yahweh has made a promise to regather his people again, and there will no longer be two houses with two kings. They will be restored back to one house with one king one day. So let's read Isaiah 11, verse 12 through 14. And he shall raise a banner for the nations and gather the outcasts of Israel and assemble the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. And the envy of Ephraim shall turn aside, and the adversaries of Judah will be cut off. Ephraim shall not envy Judah, and Judah not trouble Ephraim, but they shall fly down upon the shoulder of the Philistines towards the west. Together they shall plunder the people of the east, their hands stretching forth on Edom and Moab, and the children of Ammon shall be subject to them. Now here it is in Ezekiel 37, 15 through 25. We can see the whole picture coming together. And the word of Yahweh came to me, saying, And you, son of man, take a stick for yourself and write on it, for Judah and for the children of Israel, his companions. Then take another stick, write on it, for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, and for all the house of Israel and his companions. Then bring them together for yourself into one stick, and they shall become one in your hand. And when the children of your people speak to you, saying, Won't you show us what you mean by these? Say to them, Thus saith the Master Yahweh, See, I am taking the stick of Joseph, which is in the hand of Ephraim, and the tribes of Israel, his companions, and I shall give them unto him with the stick of Judah, and make them into one stick, in other words, one house. And they shall be one in my hand, and the sticks on which you write be in your hand before their eyes, and speak to them. Thus saith the Master Yahweh, See, I am taking the children of Israel from among the Gentiles wherever they have gone, the lost tribes, and shall gather them from all around, and I shall bring them into their land, and I shall make them one nation in the land on the mountains of Israel, and one king shall be over them all. And let them no longer be two nations, and let them no longer be divided into two reigns. And they shall no longer defile themselves with their idols, nor with their filthiness, nor with any of their transgressions. And I shall save them from all of their dwelling places in which they have sinned, and I shall cleanse them. And they shall be my people, and I shall be their Elohim, while David my servant is king over them. This is a reference to Yeshua. This is a reference to Yeshua. My David, my servant, is king over them, and they shall all have one shepherd, Yeshua, and walk in my right rulings and guard my laws, and shall do them. And they shall dwell in the land that I have given to Jacob my servant, where your fathers dwelt, your ancestors dwelt. And they shall dwell in it, and they and their children and their children's children forever. And my servant David, Yeshua, be their prince forever. Hallelujah. So going back, tying it all in the beginning of what I was saying is that we see that Yeshua was with the 12 disciples, which is symbolic of the 12 tribes being reunited together with one king, which is Yeshua HaMashiach, ruling over them forever. Hallelujah, hallelujah. As always, may our Father Yahweh bless you in Yeshua HaMashiach's name. Todah Rabbah, thank you very much for joining in, and shalom.